Hi everyone, it's Ren here. I hope you're doing well. In this video, I will be kind of starting a new series, but um, it's also a series that I would like to sort of probe you about, see if you'd find that interesting. I was discussing with a friend recently, and he was telling me that it might be interesting to have like little sort of recognizable series associated with the channel. And for the INFJ side of things, I'm considering just starting a series which might not be of infinite duration, and you're going to understand why, called INFJ Encounters or something. So examples of like when I met an INFJ in real life and how it felt, and trying to give you like a rendition as truthful as possible of how it felt to be in the presence of another INFJ, whether I was aware of it at the time or not, you know, these different aspects. I don't know, because I figured it might be good to keep this more personal side to my channel, because I realized that not only are people, you know, often interested in that more personal side, but even as far as I'm concerned, there are days when I just want to be personal, and not as theoretical as I sometimes can be. I enjoy that too, of course, but there are days when I want to just go back and look back at particular events. I mentioned in the video that I don't do that enough. I don't look at the past enough, but there are definitely events in my life where I have been encountering INFJs in the wild, and I figured that, yeah, like I could sort of make a few episodes on that and how it felt, and maybe you guys can relate to me how it felt to meet other INFJs, or if you're not INFJ, how it felt as an ENFP to meet an ENFP, or as an ENTP to meet an ENTP, anything. And so that's the idea, and I'm gonna open the first episode right now, with the prelude being that I think, off the top of my head, I have met, I think, 4 INFJs for sure in my life in person. No, actually 5. Sorry, 5 INFJs. 5 INFJs. I've lived in 3 countries. My country of birth, France. My country of study, university study, Ireland. And my country of work, Switzerland, as of now, more specifically Geneva. And it's quite simple, really. In my country of birth, in France, I have never met any INFJ in the flesh. In my country of study, I met at least 1 INFJ, possibly more, but 1 for sure. And that person was my ex-girlfriend for, you know, she's my ex-girlfriend. But she's Swiss, interestingly. And then in Switzerland, I have actually met 4 INFJs. So that's clearly indicating that, you know, Switzerland has been a more productive area to meet INFJs than any other place. I have a feeling, although this is a broad categorization, that in France you are not likely to meet a lot of NI dominance, I get the impression. And in Ireland, you're not, it's more often the case to meet, at least it was for me, FI users. But in Switzerland, I have met quite a few. And yeah, today I would like to recall the memory of one particular INFJ person. That person does not know that she is INFJ, but I'm absolutely certain that she is INFJ. And the reason why I think that I'm pretty certain that she is INFJ is that she just was very clearly NI dominant in the way that she looked at you specifically. So I met this person when I was doing an internship in an NGO in 2014, 2015. And that person was one of the heads of, you know, of the NGO. It's an NGO that works in, broadly speaking, conflict and security, and that person was like head for policy, so pretty high up position. And it was quite a formal NGO, you know, to be in. And I got the impression that from early on, I had a weird connection with that person. That person was, unlike the other heads of the organization, it's not that she wasn't taking herself seriously, but she just was immediately much more close to people. You know, like she didn't necessarily enforce this sense of rigid formality between people from different like levels of the hierarchy. At the time I was an intern, so like there were quite many rungs of hierarchy separating us, and yet we just talked about things in a very natural way. Maybe that would be the ideal in any workplace, but it definitely wasn't with this quite hierarchical NGO. Not all NGOs are like that, but it was like that with that NGO. But not with that person. Not with that person. At the time, I was not aware that I was INFJ, and now I am aware. She's still not aware she's an INFJ because she's a bit older, and I don't think she ever looked into the test. I could be wrong. Like maybe someday I can mention it to her, but I work in a different place now, and she also works in a different place, so we have not really met since. But yeah, like it was striking how she was not really taking hierarchy into account in dealings with other people. There's always, she's quite a spacey person. You got the impression that she was kind of always in her thoughts, had a very clear stare, like the NI style stare. And I bumped into her recently at the tram station, and like her stare was so evident. You know, it was like, wow. It just came to me. I was like, of course she's INFJ. Because I had found myself months prior to that thinking about the NGO and trying to type the people that work there, and I could not tell whether she was an INTP or an INFJ. But when I met her again, it was very clear, because she has that like gentleness, and she had that curiosity. So it came across like she felt in her position where she was working that she was looking for her insights from potentially anyone, not necessarily insights that would come from a member of the hierarchy that was at her level or higher or a tiny bit lower. Like to her, it seemed that any potential conversation, she preferred substantial conversations for sure, but it seems that any conversation with anyone was susceptible of being potentially interesting, and that the relationship between how interesting the conversation was likely to be and the position of the person was kind of not existent, really. You know, she was just interested in the actual substance of the conversation. A very smart person, a deep person, and a gentle person, always smiling, always saying hi, with an aura of mystery about her, for sure, seemed very empathic. And yeah, and I kind of developed directly a link with her. It's a shame that I didn't know at the time that about INFJness, or at least not in detail, because I think that otherwise I would have tried to mention it to her, and maybe we could have developed a bond that would have been solid enough for us to remain in touch afterwards. She's about, I don't know, I want to say that she's about 15 years older than me, maybe not even, like 10 years older at most, actually, at most. Because it would have made sense to her, you know, it would have made sense to her, and yeah, essentially that didn't happen, unfortunately, but it would have been great because I felt a connection, and I think she felt the connection too, to an extent. But what is a bit of a shame, is that I at some point I applied for another internship within that organization, and I was not finished with the internship that I was doing at the time, but I was very bored by it. And my boss, an ESFP, was great. I got on with him really well, but it was more logistically oriented than the internship that she had opened in her own research unit. And I was like, not only did I want to do more research, and the prospect of working with her was like fantastic, And so I applied for it, despite the fact that I was still doing another internship in the same NGO in different office. And that was a tricky move for me to make, but I asked some of my intern friends, and they were like, yeah, of course, just warn your current boss and just tell him, and if that's what you feel like you want to do it. And so I applied for it, and I knew that person, the INFJ, initially was a bit awkward about the fact that I would leave my current internship to join her internship, potentially, to join her office. She was a bit uncomfortable regarding my ESFP boss, and I had to sort of talk to each side, and eventually, I didn't get the internship. I don't think that the reason why I didn't get it, although I kind of justified it to myself at the time, like that, was that she didn't want to put my, she didn't want to be in a bad position with regards to my ESFP boss. Of course, it didn't make things easier because it would have forced him to recruit someone new. But I'm pretty sure that the reason why she didn't select me was that that she found someone better. And actually, I became friends with that guy afterwards. And I think he's an INTP. Brilliant guy, and totally deserved to get the internship. And yeah, she selected him, and it's a shame because I think that guy, who I was number 2 and he was number 1, but I think that guy was potentially like the best intern that organization had in years. And that organization had internships open all the time. It just so happened that when I applied to work with the INFJ person, I was up against him, and he was better. I think that we had an assignment, and because I sent my CV and everything, I had an interview, but we also had a test, and I was told afterwards that the first part of my test was brilliant, but the second was too abstract and too academic and not hands-on enough, and that's like one of my weaknesses, so but what's interesting, and maybe I'll finish with that, and to bring it back to the INFJ bond, is that I was very upset. I was very upset by not getting this internship. And I think that the reason why I was very upset was in part because I would have loved to work in research for that organization. But if I'm honest with myself, I think there was another part of me that was really sad about having the prospect of working with that person with whom I had like a bond. I identified with her. Like just having it fall to pieces. And maybe even within that falling to pieces and that disappointment, there was a slight resentment. Maybe not a resentment, but let's call it a resentment about the fact that despite the bonds, she still selected someone else. In hindsight, she was right to do that because the other person was more qualified and had a better application, most likely. No, he did. Let's say he did. But yeah, at the time, I felt almost like, we get on so well, and like you can see that I have great potential, and like why don't I didn't say that, but I was upset because she sent me like a randomly written email, impersonal email, telling me that I had not been selected, like she sent to the other people, and I was so disappointed that I didn't answer it. And she did something that was very effy, in my opinion. Like a week later, she was away for work. She was in the field for a while, and then she came back, and she came to my office. My ESFP boss wasn't there, and she came to my office and she said, "Can we talk for a while?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, I noticed that you didn't answer my email that said, that I didn't select you." And that's her talking to me. Again, keep in mind, high up person, and I was an intern. And she said to me, "I noticed that you didn't answer it, and I wanted to make sure that you were not upset, or that you were, if it was all okay, like if I just didn't want to upset you, and I just want to make sure that things are okay, and if you want, we can go for lunch and I'll give you some feedback on your application." And you can really see she had a smile that said, like, I want things to be well between us. She was seeking harmony. And it was very important for me to get that expression of care from her for some reason, and I think it was connected to this, like in the background, INFJ bond that I had with her. She acknowledged the bond, even if it was about wanting to make sure that I was not upset. She had acknowledged it in some sense. And I said everything was okay, and from then onwards, I was reconciled to the fact, and everything was okay again. So that was my experience with that INFJ person. Let me know what you thought and if you have any experience yourself. Take care, guys.